Empathy is important, but self-preservation is critical. This is a fundamental truth when it comes to dealing with narcissists. While it's natural to want to understand others and offer support, when you're dealing with someone who has narcissistic traits, your emotional and mental well-being must take priority. Narcissists are often experts at eliciting empathy from others, using their charm, vulnerability, or manipulation to pull you into their world. They may present themselves as victims, needing your care, attention, and validation, but the reality is that their need for empathy is often self-serving and doesn't lead to any genuine change. This creates a dangerous dynamic where your empathy becomes a tool for their manipulation, and you lose sight of your own emotional needs. In relationships with narcissists, empathy can quickly become an emotional drain. You might find yourself constantly giving, offering emotional support, and trying to help them see things from a different perspective. At first, this might feel rewarding, especially if the narcissist appears grateful for your understanding. However, over time, you'll likely notice that no matter how much you give, it's never enough. The narcissist's needs are insatiable. Their emotional hunger is so deep that they cannot truly be filled by your empathy. They do not use it to heal or grow, but to continue reinforcing their inflated sense of self-importance. In this way, your empathy serves as nothing more than a temporary solution, masking the real problem rather than addressing it. In the face of this, self-preservation becomes critical. Empathy, while essential in many relationships, cannot be the foundation when dealing with narcissists. If you continue to pour out empathy while neglecting your own needs, you will begin to lose yourself in the process. Your emotional energy will be depleted and your sense of self will erode. Narcissists often don't recognize the toll they take on others because their focus is entirely on themselves. They lack the capacity for empathy towards others, and their primary concern is fulfilling their own desires. When you try to meet these needs, you are not helping them grow, you are enabling their dysfunction. Self-preservation requires setting boundaries, knowing when to say no, and learning to prioritize your own well-being over the narcissist's demands. It involves recognizing that you cannot sacrifice your mental health, emotional stability, or personal happiness in an effort to cater to someone who is incapable of giving back in a meaningful way. This is not about being unkind or unempathetic. It's about recognizing the limits of what you can do for someone who refuses to take responsibility for their actions and behaviors. It's about understanding that your ability to care for others is rooted in your own emotional health, and if that health is compromised, you will not be able to help anyone, let alone a narcissist. When you engage in self-preservation, you start to understand the importance of detaching your sense of worth from the narcissist's approval. Narcissists often manipulate others by appealing to their desire for validation. They can make you feel needed, special, or indispensable, creating a bond based on their dependence on your empathy. This makes it difficult to see the situation clearly because it becomes easy to believe that your worth is tied to their perception of you. You might start to feel that if you stop offering empathy, you'll lose their approval, or worse, lose the relationship altogether. But in reality, these relationships are one-sided, and the narcissist's approval is often shallow and short-lived. They are rarely capable of offering anything meaningful in return. This makes it vital to separate your self-worth from their manipulation. Another aspect of self-preservation is recognizing when to step away. In many cases, narcissists are skilled at creating chaos, drawing you into their drama and keeping you emotionally engaged in their issues. This constant engagement can be overwhelming and exhausting. In these situations, taking a step back is necessary. It's not about abandoning the person, but about protecting yourself from becoming enmeshed in their toxic patterns. When you give yourself the space to distance emotionally, you create room to reconnect with your own needs and desires. You begin to focus on what truly matters to you and reclaim your energy, something that is essential if you want to avoid emotional burnout. Self-preservation also means recognizing when the relationship has become too toxic to sustain. Narcissists often push boundaries, belittle others, and use people for their own gain. This creates a pattern where the narcissist's needs are always prioritized and your own needs are ignored. The more you try to please them or meet their emotional demands, the more they take and the less they are willing to give. When this happens, it becomes clear that empathy is not helping anyone. It's only deepening your own sense of frustration, sadness, or resentment. At this point, self-preservation might involve reevaluating the relationship and asking whether it's healthy or whether it's time to move on for your own mental and emotional well-being. It's important to understand that empathy does not mean enabling destructive behavior. You might empathize with the narcissist's struggles or their past trauma, but that doesn't mean you should tolerate their toxic actions. Empathy should never come at the cost of your own mental health or sense of safety. It's vital to recognize the difference between offering genuine support and enabling someone's inability to change. When you prioritize your own self-preservation, you stop enabling the narcissist's destructive patterns and you start protecting yourself from further harm. In the end, self-preservation is about recognizing that you cannot give what you do not have. If you are constantly giving your emotional energy to a narcissist who refuses to change, you will eventually have nothing left to give. By choosing to prioritize your own well-being, you give yourself the opportunity to heal, grow, and engage in relationships that are healthy and reciprocal. Empathy is valuable, but it cannot be the only force driving your interactions with others, especially when those others are narcissists who are incapable of respecting your needs. Self-preservation must always come first, for without it, you risk losing the very essence of who you are. Setting firm boundaries forces self-reflection. This is a crucial aspect when dealing with narcissists who often thrive in environments where they are allowed to control the dynamics of relationships. Narcissists can be skilled at manipulating others, bending situations to their advantage, and convincing people to give up their personal space, their time, and even their emotional energy. However, when you set firm boundaries, you are asserting your rights and demanding respect for your own needs, and this forces the narcissist to deal with the limitations of their behavior. Boundaries act as a mirror, reflecting their actions back at them in a way that leaves them with no choice but to confront the impact they are having on others. Boundaries are not about controlling the narcissist or trying to change them, but rather about protecting yourself and maintaining your sense of autonomy. Narcissists, by their very nature, do not have a true understanding of personal boundaries. They see relationships as a means to fulfill their own needs, and they are often blind to the emotional and psychological toll they impose on others. In the absence of clear boundaries, they will continue to take without regard for the well-being of those around them. Setting boundaries, therefore, is not just an act of self-preservation. It is also an opportunity to disrupt the narcissist patterns and challenge the narrative they've constructed around themselves. When you set boundaries with a narcissist, you are establishing clear lines that protect your time, energy, and emotional space. These boundaries can be physical, emotional, or psychological. For example, you might set a limit on how much time you are willing to spend with them, or you may establish certain topics that are off limits for discussion. These limits, though seemingly small, communicate a message of self-respect and self-care. They show the narcissist that you are not willing to sacrifice your well-being to maintain the relationship. Narcissists are often used to people accommodating their needs without question. So when you introduce boundaries, it can be jarring to them. This disruption is necessary for their self-reflection because it forces them to consider the consequences of their actions. The reality is that narcissists often see themselves as entitled to the time, energy, and attention of others without any regard for the needs or desires of those around them. They operate under the belief that their importance justifies the imposition on others. This is why boundaries are so powerful. They challenge this entitlement and make it clear that their needs do not automatically take precedence over yours. By setting these limits, you are demonstrating that you have your own life to live, your own priorities to pursue, and your own sense of self to protect. This can be difficult for a narcissist to accept, as it threatens their sense of some control. However, it is precisely this challenge that can lead to self-reflection. When you stand firm in the face of a narcissist's attempts to push past your boundaries, they are confronted with a reality that they may not have encountered before. For someone who is used to getting what they want without resistance, having someone say no or this is not acceptable can be a shock. Narcissists are often so accustomed to manipulation and control that they are unprepared for the emotional consequences of facing rejection or limitations. It is in this moment that they may start to question their behavior, even if they do not immediately admit it. The discomfort they experience when they are met with resistance can create a crack in their carefully constructed sense of self, and it is here that the potential for growth begins. Setting boundaries with a narcissist also forces them to reckon with their own lack of empathy. Narcissists often have an underdeveloped sense of empathy, meaning they are largely unaware of the impact their behavior has on others. By enforcing boundaries, you are showing them that their actions have consequences, and this is the first step in forcing them to acknowledge the reality of their behavior. They may not immediately accept the boundaries you set, and they may try to challenge or violate them. However, over time, if the boundaries remain firm and consistent, the narcissist will begin to recognize that their usual tactics of manipulation and control will no longer work. This recognition can spark a period of self-reflection where they are forced to ask themselves why their typical approach is no longer effective. Furthermore, boundaries provide you with the opportunity to reinforce your sense of self-worth. When you allow a narcissist to violate your boundaries, you send a message to yourself that your needs and feelings are secondary to theirs. This is damaging to your own self-esteem and self-respect. By setting and maintaining clear boundaries, you affirm your right to exist as an individual with your own needs, wants, and desires. You are telling yourself that you matter. And this in turn can encourage the narcissist to recognize that you will no longer tolerate their behavior. This kind of self-affirmation is essential as it restores your sense of personal agency and helps you to maintain your emotional health in the face of narcissistic manipulation. Ultimately, setting firm boundaries is an act of empowerment. It may not immediately result in a narcissist changing their ways, but it forces them to confront the reality that their behavior will not go unchallenged. The more consistent and firm you are in upholding your boundaries, the clearer it becomes that you are not a passive participant in their manipulation. This shift in dynamics can cause the narcissist to pause and reflect on their actions, even if they don't openly acknowledge it. In the end, it is the consistency of your boundaries that forces them to consider the consequences of their behavior and whether it is worth continuing in the same destructive patterns. While the process of self-reflection may be slow and difficult for the narcissist, it is only through this confrontation with reality that any real change is possible. Confronting truth is the only catalyst for change. This is an essential concept when dealing with narcissism, yet it's one that many people fail to grasp. The idea that you can be kind enough, understanding enough, or patient enough to change someone who is deeply entrenched in narcissistic behaviors is a misconception. Narcissists do not respond to typical methods of intervention such as affection, empathy, or gentleness. They are not moved by anything that seeks to comfort them in the moment. What they need to hear is something far more uncomfortable. They need to confront the truth. A truth that challenges the false and inflated self-image they've spent years, if not their entire lives, constructing. Without that confrontation, no real change can occur. Narcissists live in a world of delusion where their self-worth is based on external validation and distorted perception of their own greatness. This delusion is fragile, and any disruption to it feels like an existential threat. They have developed coping mechanisms to avoid the truth. Lying, gaslighting, and manipulation are all tools they use to protect themselves from facing reality. When you're dealing with someone who has narcissistic traits, you'll often find that they are extremely resistant to any form of self-reflection or honest feedback. They simply do not want to hear that they are not as flawless as they believe themselves to be. The truth to them is too painful to acknowledge, and they will go to great lengths to avoid it. However, without being forced to confront the reality of their behavior, there is little hope of meaningful change. This is why being gentle or kind with a narcissist doesn't lead to transformation. It allows them to continue their destructive cycle. Kindness, while often well-intentioned, rarely serves as a catalyst for growth. Instead, it perpetuates the illusion that they are justified in their actions. Narcissists need to be confronted with the impact of their behavior, the damage they cause, and the reality of who they are. The truth is what destabilizes their false sense of superiority and forces them to question their identity. If you continually shield them from this truth, you only prolong their delusion and enable their behavior. The longer the narcissist remains in denial, the less likely they are to change, because they will never see themselves as the problem. The truth, however uncomfortable it may be, is what breaks through the facade and opens the door to the possibility of self-awareness and growth. It's important to recognize that the truth must be delivered in a way that cuts through the narcissist's defenses. This is not about being cruel or mean-spirited. Rather, it's about being honest and direct, setting firm boundaries and not backing down. The truth must be stated clearly and confidently. A narcissist will often attempt to deflect, deny, or redirect the conversation, but if you remain firm and consistent in your approach, it becomes harder for them to ignore the facts. You may find that they react defensively, perhaps even angrily, because the truth challenges their carefully constructed self-image. This is part of the process. They need to be disturbed by the reality of their actions in order to begin the difficult work of self-reflection. Narcissists often have a deep-seated fear of being exposed, of being seen as flawed or imperfect. They are terrified that if others see their true selves, they will be rejected or abandoned. This fear is rooted in insecurity, but it manifests as an overinflated sense of entitlement and superiority. Their need to be seen as perfect and infallible drives their behavior and fuels their narcissism. In many cases, the narcissist's entire worldview revolves around maintaining an image of superiority and control. When you challenge this image by confronting them with the truth, you are asking them to face the very thing they fear most, the reality of their own imperfection. This is not easy for them to accept, but it is the first step in any meaningful change. The process of confronting a narcissist with the truth can be incredibly difficult. It requires a great deal of courage, as well as the willingness to stand firm in the face of their likely resistance. Narcissists often use manipulation tactics such as guilt-tripping, belittling, or gaslighting to undermine your confidence and divert attention away from their actions. They may try to make you feel responsible for their behavior or convince you that you are the one at fault. In these moments, it's crucial to stay grounded in the truth and not allow them to twist the narrative. You are not responsible for their actions, and you must not allow them to convince you otherwise. This confrontation can also be exhausting, both emotionally and mentally, as narcissists are relentless in their pursuit of control. But it is only by holding the line and refusing to back down that the narcissist may start to understand the consequences of their behavior. The truth is what forces them to confront the gap between the person they think they are and the reality of who they truly are. This can be a painful process, and it is not one that will happen overnight. Change is slow and often requires repeated confrontations with the truth before any real progress is made. However, it is the only approach that holds any hope of breaking through the narcissist's defenses and encouraging them to take regime. Without truth, there can be no transformation, just an ongoing cycle of denial and manipulation. If you truly want to help a narcissist change, you must be willing to push through the discomfort of confronting the truth. It's not an easy task, and it will likely require more patience and resilience than you ever imagined. But it is the only way to break the cycle of manipulation and begin to address the root cause of their behavior. Only by confronting them with the truth and forcing them to face the consequences of their actions can you create the conditions necessary for growth and self-awareness. Now, let's start with something we all need to confront, something uncomfortable but absolutely essential to understand in this life. You see, there's a popular idea circulating today that if you just be nice, if you're kind enough, patient enough, compassionate enough, you can change the people around you. And yes, kindness has its place, but it has limits. When it comes to a narcissist, a person who sees the world as revolving around themselves, being nice won't do a thing to change them. Kindness alone won't dismantle narcissism. In fact, when you encounter a narcissist, offering endless kindness or trying to be overly accommodating often leads to a cycle of frustration and ultimately self-sacrifice. A narcissist does not respond to kindness the way you might hope because their worldview is fundamentally different from yours. They don't see the world through a lens of empathy or shared humanity. Instead, they view it as a stage for their own performance, where everyone exists to validate their self-worth. The idea that kindness can change a narcissist is a deeply flawed one. It ignores the nature of narcissism itself. A narcissist's behavior isn't a result of insecurity that can be soothed by compassion. Narcissism is rooted in a pathological need for admiration, control, and validation. This need doesn't dissipate simply because someone shows kindness or offers understanding. In fact, kindness can often be seen by a narcissist as a form of weakness, an opportunity to further manipulate or extract more from you. When you offer kindness to a narcissist, you're not getting through to their deeper self. Instead, you're reinforcing their sense of entitlement and their belief that they are deserving of more without needing to offer anything in return. The more you give, the more they take, and the less likely they are to change. Narcissists often lack the ability to connect with others on a meaningful level. They might be charming at first, but this charm is often a strategy, a way to draw you in to get what they want, whether that's admiration, attention, or power. They are not interested in you as a person, they're interested in what you can do for them. Kindness then becomes a tool they can exploit to maintain their inflated sense of self-worth. Offering kindness in this context is not an act of goodwill. It's a signal that you are willing to play the game on their terms, and they will accept nothing less. Their need for validation is insatiable, and no amount of kindness will ever fill the void they feel inside. Moreover, narcissists are often incredibly resistant to change. Their entire identity is built around the belief that they are special, superior, and deserving of admiration. If you attempt to use kindness as a means to reach them, you are inadvertently reinforcing their self-image rather than challenging it. Narcissists don't need more validation, they need the truth. But this truth is something they are often unwilling or unable to hear because it threatens their fragile ego. Offering kindness then becomes counterproductive as it avoids the hard truths that could help them confront their own behavior and start the process of change. Even when a narcissist does express appreciation for your kindness, it's usually temporary. They quickly revert to their old patterns of behavior as their sense of entitlement and their need to control the situation take precedence once again. Kindness doesn't create a lasting impact on someone whose entire identity is based on manipulation, self-absorption, and a constant need for external validation. You may think that by being generous and patient with them, you can soften their heart or appeal to their better nature, but the truth is that narcissists often lack the emotional capacity to appreciate genuine kindness. They are not interested in mutual respect or reciprocal relationships. Their kindness, when it comes, is often self-serving. At the same time, being excessively nice or accommodating to a narcissist can be harmful to you. The more you give, the more you allow them to take. In the process, you risk losing sight of your own needs, your own boundaries, and your own well-being. Narcissists are often oblivious to the suffering they cause in others because their focus is always on themselves. They don't understand that their actions have consequences and they don't care to learn. Offering endless kindness in the hope that it will change them is a recipe for burnout. It's a way of ignoring your own needs in favor of trying to fix someone who is unwilling to change. If you want to make any kind of difference with a narcissist, you must move beyond the simplistic idea that kindness is the answer. While being respectful, And maintaining your own sense of dignity is important. You cannot expect kindness alone to create the necessary conditions for growth or transformation. Narcissists do not learn through gentle gestures or the application of kindness. They learn through confrontation, through a direct and often uncomfortable engagement with the reality of their own behavior. They must be faced with the consequences of their actions and the impact they have on others. Only then can there be any hope of change. True growth for a narcissist doesn't come from softening their world with kindness. It comes from challenging their view of themselves and the world around them, forcing them to confront the truth they've spent their lives avoiding. This is a painful process for both them and the people around them, but it is the only real pathway to change. Kindness may make them feel good in the moment, but it won't get to the root of their dysfunction. And it certainly won't make them better people. Narcissists thrive on manipulation, not compassion. This is perhaps the most critical realization when dealing with a narcissistic individual. While we often assume that someone who is self-centered or demanding can be swayed by showing them kindness or understanding, we fail to recognize the true dynamics at play. Narcissists are not simply individuals with a high opinion of themselves. They are often master manipulators, skilled in reading others, using that knowledge to bend situations in their favor and controlling the narrative in every interaction. Their goal is not mutual respect or cooperation. It is to dominate and extract whatever they need to maintain their fragile self-image. For a narcissist, manipulation is a survival mechanism. Their entire sense of worth is built on a foundation of external validation, and any threat to this validation is met with a reaction designed to regain control. They are not interested in building healthy, balanced relationships based on trust and understanding. Instead, they thrive on exerting power over others, twisting situations to make others feel indebted or guilty, and ensuring that they are always the center of attention. When a narcissist senses a power shift, they will use any means necessary to pull things back in their favor, whether that's through guilt, gaslighting, or outright deceit. Compassion, by contrast, is a response grounded in empathy and mutual care. But for a narcissist, these qualities are weaknesses to be exploited. Compassion and kindness are often viewed as opportunities to take advantage of others. A narcissist doesn't see these gestures as genuine efforts to connect with another person. Instead, they perceive them as tools to be used to further their own agenda. When you show compassion to a narcissist, you are offering something they will take without hesitation and without a second thought about your needs. They may pretend to appreciate your kindness in the moment, but it's usually only a matter of time before they exploit it for their own gain. In their relationships, narcissists rarely give back in the way that would be expected in a healthy dynamic. They often appear charming and affectionate at first, but this is simply part of the seduction phase. That their charm is not genuine, it's calculated and aimed at winning you over so they can extract something from you, whether it's attention, admiration, or resources. Once they have you hooked, they begin to manipulate using tactics such as guilt, shame, and gaslighting to maintain control. They'll twist your words, make you doubt your own reality, and place the blame for any conflict on you, all while maintaining an outwardly calm and collected demeanor. Compassion in this environment is not seen as a positive force, but as a vulnerability to be exploited. The manipulation tactics of a narcissist can be subtle but extremely effective. They know how to read people and understand their vulnerabilities. They will use this knowledge to create situations where they appear like the victim, despite their clear role in creating the problems. For instance, they might feign vulnerability even if they are the ones causing harm in order to draw sympathy from others and make you feel guilty for standing your ground. This strategy ensures that they remain the central figure in the relationship, with others catering to their needs while their own actions go unchecked. The narcissist thrives on creating an environment where their actions are constantly excused, where they never have to take responsibility for the fallout of their behavior. They will isolate you from your support system, manipulate you into thinking that you're the one who's unreasonable, and convince you that their destructive actions are a natural response to the world's unfair treatment of them. In this way, narcissists build a narrative that centers on themselves, where everything that goes wrong is always someone else's fault, and they are always the one who deserves sympathy and attention. If you offer compassion in this scenario, you're simply reinforcing their ability to manipulate. The more you give them what they want, the more they take and the more they demand. They will use your empathy as a tool to continue manipulating you, draining your emotional energy while providing little in return. Their need for admiration and validation is insatiable, and no amount of understanding or kindness can ever fill that void. The more you attempt to connect with them on an emotional level, the more they will twist that connection into something that benefits them, usually at your expense. It's important to recognize that narcissism is not a condition that can be easily fixed through affection or empathy. Their sense of entitlement and superiority is so ingrained that it becomes the driving force behind all of their actions. Compassion might make you feel better for a moment, but it will not stop the narcissist from using and manipulating you in the long term. The only way to deal with a narcissist is not by playing into their need for constant validation. but by asserting your own boundaries and holding them accountable for the behavior. When you do this, you stop being a pawn in their manipulative game and start to reclaim your own sense of agency. By refusing to be manipulated, you begin to understand that compassion is not enough. You cannot cure narcissism through kindness or understanding. Instead, you need to shift the dynamic, setting clear limits and refusing to allow their manipulative behavior to continue unchecked. Recognizing the power of manipulation in a narcissistic relationship is key to protecting yourself and maintaining your sense of self-worth.